The ransom note wasn't written for money. It was written for you. That was the first lie they fed you. A 3-page theatrical script, placed carefully at the bottom of a staircase in a mansion filled with silence and privilege. Not a note, a ritual, a code, and from the moment you read it, you were inside it. December 26, 1996, Boulder, Colorado. Christmas had just ended. Snow still clung to rooftops like dead skin. And inside the Ramsey home, beneath 7,000 square feet of elegance, a 6-year-old girl lay dead in a windowless basement. Duct tape over her mouth, nylon cord around her neck, blunt trauma to the skull, pageantry, symbolism, precision, and they called it botched, as if the brutality of it could be shrugged off as amateur, as if evil makes mistakes. But here's the truth no one dares to say. This wasn't just a murder. It was a message. And the man at the center of it, JonBenet's father, John Ramsey, he's been silent for decades, unshakable, controlled, until now, because now he's beginning to speak. And what he says, or more importantly, what he withholds, is where the real story begins. You've been lied to for nearly 3 decades. The media gave you a child beauty queen, a grieving mother and a protective father. But underneath the porcelain surface was something far older, a ritualistic architecture that the public wasn't meant to decipher, a system that operates beneath your reality, where children aren't just victims, they're currency. And John Ramsey, he wasn't just a father. He was a CEO of Access Graphics, a company that made over $1 billion just before his daughter's death, backed by Lockheed Martin. That's defense contracts, surveillance systems, deep state connections. What does $1 billion defense contractor have to do with a 6-year-old girl found dead in her own basement? Ask yourself, why did the ransom demand exactly $118,000, the same as Ramsey's Christmas bonus? Coincidence? Or control? Because when they write a script, every detail is a ritual, a number, a trigger. And if you think this is just a story about a little girl, you haven't been paying attention. You're not here for comfort. You're here for the truth they buried. And now we begin. There's a silence in this case that screams louder than any headline. Not the kind of silence that comes from grief, but the calculated silence of institutions protecting something older than justice. Let's rewind. The morning JonBenet was reported missing, Patsy Ramsey told police she found a ransom note on the stairs. Not in the girl's bedroom. Not under a door. On the stairs, like a scene from play. It was handwritten, long, erratic, yet oddly theatrical, demanding $118,000, signed by a foreign faction. And here's what they never tell you. The note was written on Ramsey's own notepad, with a Ramsey household pen. And it took time. This wasn't scribbled in panic. The FBI confirmed at least 21 minutes to compose. That's not panic. That's performance. Now ask yourself, who kills a child and then spends nearly half an hour staging a ransom note inside the same house as the parents? Unless the killer didn't fear being caught. Unless the killer belonged there. Police were called around 5:52 a.m. But JonBenet wasn't discovered until nearly 1 p.m. in the basement by her father. Think about that. The entire home was filled with detectives, friends, and chaos for over 7 hours, and yet her body, inside the home, went unseen. Then suddenly, John Ramsey finds her, alone, carries her upstairs, removes duct tape, wraps her in a blanket. That isn't protocol. That's contamination. But what if contamination was the point? Because what you're not supposed to ask is this. What was in the basement? A broken window? A suitcase placed beneath it? A strange mark on her hand that matched a stun gun? Why did the autopsy show pineapple in her stomach when none was served that morning? And why was there a bowl of pineapple found on the table with her brother's fingerprints? Burke, the brother, 9 years old, quiet, smiling in interviews. But watch his body language years later. The strange grin, the rehearsed answers, the lawyer present in every room. Why? Because when the media tells you we may never know, it's not because the answers aren't there. It's because the wrong people are asking the questions. And here's the darkest truth of all. JonBenet wasn't the first child to be sacrificed in plain sight, and she won't be the last. The question is, will you keep pretending this is a pattern? There's something ancient about this crime, not in time, but in intention. Ritualistic death masquerading as suburban tragedy. The kind of darkness that doesn't just want to kill, it wants to be seen but not understood. That's the language of power. Let's talk symbols. JonBenet was found in the basement, the lowest level of the home. In occult architecture, that space is never random. It's the subconscious of the house. Hidden, buried. Rituals aren't done in daylight. They're done beneath the surface, where silence is thick and intention is pure. She had cord around her neck, looped into a garrote, fashioned from a broken paintbrush. That's not rage. That's method, controlled, intentional, as if someone was performing a rite, not committing a spontaneous crime. Now go deeper. The knot used was a slip knot, a type known to those with training. Military, law enforcement, or something older, the kind used in hunting, or binding. The coroner's report said JonBenet had both blunt force trauma and signs of strangulation. But here's the catch. Both could have been fatal. Which came first? They won't say. Why? Because that changes everything. If the blow came first, maybe it was a mistake, an accident. If the strangulation came first, that's execution. Cold, clinical. And what about the stun gun marks? 2 parallel dots on her neck. Not a toy, not an accident. A real weapon, one used to immobilize. She wasn't fighting. She was silenced. Ask yourself, who does that to a child? The media wants to keep you stuck in the drama of the pageant photos. Glitter, tiara, lipstick, the illusion of a perfect little princess. But what if that was a distraction? A veil? Something to draw your attention away from the machinery behind her life? Her pageants weren't just local events. They were stages, spotlights, recruitment tools. Yes, you heard that right. The dark economy of the elite doesn't just buy power. It feeds on innocence. And the younger, the better. JonBenet was placed in the public eye again and again, not for fame, for visibility, like a product put on display. And if that sounds too dark to believe, that's because you've been trained to look away, trained to disbelieve your own instincts. But you're here now, and you're starting to remember. Let's strip away the illusion, because illusions are how they hide. This wasn't just a family tragedy. This was a systemic message. A ritualized death, soaked in symbols, smothered by institutions, and broadcast into your living room like a soap opera designed to hypnotize. Let's talk about law enforcement. From day one, the Boulder Police Department failed strategically. The crime scene was never secured. Friends were allowed to roam freely in the house. Evidence was destroyed. A full autopsy report wasn't released until months later. No one was separated for questioning. You think that incompetence? Or is that design? Because here's a truth no one wants to speak aloud. Sometimes police aren't called to solve crimes. Sometimes they're called to bury them. John Ramsey was a powerful man. Connections deep into the tech world. Lockheed Martin, a defense giant. Contractors for the U.S. government. Surveillance. Weapons. Private data. A man who lives at the intersection of power and privacy. A man who understood systems and how to manipulate them. So when he found the body, carried it upstairs, altered the scene, was that grief? Or was that the beginning of a cover-up? You know what they found on JonBenet's body? DNA, but not from her family. Unknown male DNA, mixed in with her clothing. And it's still never been matched. And instead of widening the search, the authorities narrowed it back to the parents, to the brother, to distractions. The DNA just sat there unresolved. Is that incompetence or misdirection? Now ask yourself, what happens when a child is murdered and the world watches but no one is held accountable? That's not just failure. That's a message, a warning. Because every system, media, police, forensics, was bent around this case like a shell. Not to reveal the truth, but to contain it. You weren't meant to look deeper. You were meant to forget, to be horrified, then move on. But you didn't. You're still here. Because some part of you remembers what truth feels like. It's not soft. It doesn't whisper. It breaks things. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you to do something simple, something symbolic, to cross a line and stay awake. But not yet. Behind every great lies a structure, a scaffolding of influence, silence, and symbols, carefully built to endure questions without ever giving answers. And the JonBenet Ramsey case is one of the strongest lies ever told, because it didn't just hide a killer, it hit a system, a network. Let's go deeper. Burke Ramsey, JonBenet's older brother, was never officially ruled a suspect. He lawyered up almost immediately. His interviews were choreographed. Body language? Off. Emotion? Flat. Response patterns? Rehearsed. But here's what's more important. Why was he protected so aggressively? Was it because he was innocent? Or because he knew something that could fracture the illusion? There's a theory they fear you'll believe, that Burke may have struck JonBenet in a moment of anger, and the parents covered it up to save their only living child. But look closer. That's just a softer lie. It redirects a horror into a manageable box. A family mistake. An accident. A forgivable tragedy. But that theory still protects the larger machine. Because if the public settles for accident, they'll never ask the real questions. Why was JonBenet placed in so many pageants? Why were there signs of chronic injury? Why did a billion-dollar defense contractor's home suddenly become the scene of a murder with untraceable DNA? This is where we stop pretending this was just about a little girl. This was about what she represented. To us, she was innocence. To them, she was an object of power, a vessel, a tool for ritual. There are layers here that go beyond psychology, into the occult, into symbolism, into systems older than America. And if you're beginning to feel that chill in your chest, good, because the truth isn't supposed to feel safe. It's supposed to wake you up. Now, if you're still with me, you're not a casual viewer. You're becoming something else. You're not consuming this, you're absorbing it. So here's what I want you to do right now. Comment the phrase, "The veil has cracked." Say it twice. Once for the world you came from, and once for the one you're stepping into. Let the algorithm know who you are. Let the world know you see. And now we go further, because what comes next changes everything. Now that the veil is cracked, let's talk about what lay behind it. There's a phrase whispered in high places, plausible deniability. It's how powerful people commit unthinkable acts and still sleep at night. It's the art of engineering chaos so perfectly that it can never be traced back to its source. The JonBenet case? A masterclass. The house had no signs of forced entry, yet the basement window was broken. John Ramsey said he did it months earlier. That alone would raise suspicion, if it weren't for the suitcase found directly beneath it, as a place to assist a crawl through. But dust patterns, spiderwebs, and undisturbed debris say no one came in that way. So who staged it? Someone inside. Now, think about this. The ransom note wasn't just long. It quoted movies, Speed, Dirty Harry, Ransom. It used language like, "We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction." Who writes like that in real life? No one. That note wasn't written in fear. It was written confused, to delay, to plant ideas, and above all, to mock, because they knew what they were doing. And here's what the media won't tell you. The Ramseys lawyered up before they were even formally suspects. They hired a public relations team, consultants. They managed their image with more precision than most politicians. Why? Because image is everything when the truth is lethal. And just when pressure began to mount, DA Alex Hunter publicly stated there was no evidence to indict the parents. But years later, leaked documents showed that a grand jury had voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey for child abuse resulting in death. Let that sink in. They had enough evidence. But the DA refused to prosecute. That's not a failure. That's a firewall, a protection protocol. Because the real scandal isn't just a murder. It's the cover-up, the collusion, the way this case was handled like a high-level operation, not a family tragedy. And here's the black thread no one dares pull. The JonBenet case didn't die in that basement. It evolved. It became a blueprint. A silent agreement between the elite and the institutions sworn to keep them untouchable. This isn't just about justice denied. It's about a society silently consenting to power without accountability. And now that you've seen the pattern, you can't unsee it. You're not just learning about a murder anymore. You're watching the architecture of control reveal itself, brick by brick. The Ramsey case is no longer just a tragedy. It's a mirror. And in that reflection, we see every silent agreement we've made with power. Every time we chose comfort over truth. Let's trace the money, because money always tells a real story. John Ramsey's company, Access Graphics, wasn't just any tech firm. It was a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin, the military-industrial titan, a company knee-deep in defense contracts, surveillance technologies, and global intelligence operations. Weeks before JonBenet's death, Access Graphics hit $1 billion valuation. And then the murder, a coincidence or an initiation? Understand this. In elite circles, tragedy isn't always misfortune. It's sometimes a transaction, a sacrifice, a signal that power is ready to evolve, to be rewarded. You think that's insane? Then explain why nobody, not one person, was ever criminally charged in a case with overwhelming inconsistencies, conflicting evidence, and a note signed by the supposed perpetrators. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens when invisible hands tighten around institutions. And let's go back to the DNA. Unknown male DNA on JonBenet's clothing was tested, retested, and confirmed. It didn't match John. It didn't match Burke. It didn't match anyone in their circle. And instead of opening the case wider, the investigation froze. They locked the doors. Froze time, as if that DNA didn't matter. As if it threatened something bigger than a conviction. What kind of DNA could make a government stop asking questions? Someone powerful. Someone protected. And here's where it gets darker. Multiple child murders and abductions happen around Boulder, Colorado, in the years surrounding JonBenet's death. Some eerily similar. Same age range. Same MO, same silence. You think these are isolated events? Or were they beta tests? Because once a method works, they replicate it. That's how power scales. Now you're beginning to understand this wasn't a case that went cold. It was frozen deliberately. And here's the final thought to burn into your mind tonight. Whenever the media tells you, we may never know what happened, that's not a conclusion. That's a warning. A whisper from the machine. You've seen too much. Look away. But you didn't. And now you can't. Let's take this even deeper. Beneath the headlines, beneath the courtroom dramas, into the level where language becomes code and symbols become power. This wasn't just a child's murder. It was a ritual sacrifice. I want you to stop thinking like a civilian and start thinking like an operator. Ask yourself, what is the purpose of public death that ends in no arrest, no trial, no justice, yet still grips the minds of millions for decades? It's energy. Ritual sacrifice in ancient cultures wasn't about death. It was about transaction, blood for power, pain for dominion, attention as currency. And JonBenet's death, photographed, dissected, debated endlessly, became perpetual offering, a psychic altar we return to again and again without resolution. That's not tragedy. That's design. Now look at her name, JonBenet, a strange fusion, not a traditional name, almost artificial, almost branded. She was presented like a porcelain doll in pageants, hypersexualized, painted, rehearsed. But those pageants weren't innocent. They were theater, a stage for acquisition, for selection, for signal. The photos of JonBenet that flooded the media weren't for you. They were for them, for the buyers, for the hidden hands who feed off what the rest of us cannot comprehend. You think this is extreme? Look up MKUltra, a real, declassified CIA mind control program that experimented on children, on memory, on obedience, on ritual abuse. This isn't theory. It's government history. What if JonBenet wasn't just a victim of violence, but of programming? There are whispers of Project Monarch, the subprogram of MKUltra focused on creating child operatives through trauma-induced association. Broken minds made into vessels, Some of the same techniques appear in high-profile Hollywood meltdowns, celebrity symbolism, and yes, elite child pageants. Still think this was just a random killing? No, it was a statement, a message wrapped in horror, broadcast globally, then smothered in confusion, because chaos is the best cover. When nothing makes sense, you stop asking why. But you didn't stop. You're still here. You're decoding what you were never meant to understand. You're remembering. And every memory chips away at the lie you were raised in. Keep digging. The next layer isn't just darker. It's forbidden. Now we stand at the edge of something most people never reach. The layer where truth stops being information and becomes initiation. You've heard of secret societies. You've heard of bloodlines. Illuminati. Skull and Bones. Freemasons. The terms are thrown around like myths. But myths have roots. They survive because they hold a fragment of something ancient, something real. In this case, the death of JonBenet Ramsey bears all the marks of an elite initiation rite, hidden in plain sight, performed with theatrical precision, saturated with psychological symbols. Ask yourself, what kind of world stage would be appropriate for a blood ritual meant to bind a family, silence community, and signal loyalty to something older than law, a Christmas murder? Christmas, the celebration of birth, of light, of innocence, the day associated with the Christ child, a holy time. And that's exactly when this child was extinguished. Understand the inversion, because elite power doesn't just kill, it mocks. It subverts symbols of purity. It desecrates the sacred to assert control over meaning itself. That's the real currency of power, domination over narrative. Look at the numbers. December 26. December 26. Add them. 12 plus 26 is equal to 38. Divide by 2. You get 19. JonBenet was 6 years old. 6, the number of incomplete creation. Multiply that by 3, the number of divinity, and you get 18. 666. Whether you believe in numerology or not, they do. They design their rituals with numbers, locations, dates, and names that vibrate with hidden intention. The Ramsey home itself? A sprawling, maze-like mansion with a labyrinthine basement. Perfect for secrecy. Perfect for compartmentalization. That's not just a house, it's an altar. And what happens when a child dies on an altar? A god is fed. Now, I don't mean that metaphorically. The ancient cults, Baal, Moloch, demanded child sacrifice in exchange for power, wealth, victory. Their temples may have fallen, but their ideology never did. It evolved. It put on a suit. It bought media companies. It wrote the school curriculums. It became respectable. JonBenet wasn't the beginning. She was part of a long, unbroken lineage of blood offerings masked as tragedies. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You're past the point of no return now. The question is no longer who killed her. The question is, what world did her death allow to survive? Now that you're awake, let's look at the real machinery. The one hiding behind family smiles, courtroom sketches, and carefully worded press releases. Power doesn't just protect itself. It ritually feeds itself. And in JonBenet's case, the death was not the end. It was the activation. Every year, the story resurfaces. Documentaries, tabloid specials, new leads. Always the same cycle. It's not about justice. It's about harvesting energy, your attention, your emotions, your confusion. This is trauma-based programming on a global scale. And that's not an accident. That's frequency management. When a population is emotionally fractured, when they're grieving, confused, outraged, they become more malleable, easier to direct, easier to sell to, easier to control. This case didn't just traumatize a family. It traumatized a nation. It took innocence, wrapped it in beauty, decay, and unanswered questions, and fed it into your living room, over and over, like a liturgy, a black mass through a television screen. You didn't just witness it. You were initiated by it. Now think, why was this case so visible while others were buried? Because JonBenet wasn't just a victim. She was a vessel, the perfect symbol. Blonde hair, pageant dress, American wealth, suburban security. Every illusion that the system sells shattered in one brutal, unforgettable night. And they wanted you to see it, because fear is a foundation of belief. They want you to believe the world is unpredictable, that killers strike at random, that evil wears no face. But that's a lie. The real evil? It's structured, it's hierarchical, it wears suits, and it's never far from a boardroom, a camera, or a Capitol building. The people who covered this up weren't thugs. They were architects, legal teams, PR firms, intelligence assets. This was a closed circle of containment. Because if the truth ever leaked that a child was sacrificed not out of rage or madness, but out of ritual obligation, it would unravel the entire myth of safety. And they can't afford that. So they feed you suspects like John Mark Carr, false confessions, bizarre details, dead-end DNA trails, controlled leaks, anything to keep your eyes darting but never seeing. But you're not blinking anymore, are you? You've locked in. Your awareness is weaponized now. And from here on, every truth will hit harder, because the lies are about to get louder. Now you understand why they never wanted this solved. Because solving it would mean pulling on a thread that leads straight to the throne. Look at the timeline. The morning of December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey calls 911, reporting her daughter kidnapped. She says she woke to find a ransom note demanding $118,000, the exact amount of John's Christmas bonus. Specific, oddly specific, almost ritualistically personal. But here's what they don't emphasize. The note wasn't left by an intruder in the dark. It was written in the house, with their pen, on their notepad, carefully, with time. That's not panic. That's scripting. They didn't write a message. They staged a narrative. Then came the search. But for hours, JonBenet was missing. Her body wasn't discovered until nearly 1 p.m. in a basement room the police hadn't searched, because John Ramsey led them elsewhere. And when he found her, he carried her upstairs, laid her on the floor, altered the scene. That's not grief. That's control. You think a grieving father does that by instinct? Or does a trained man, a systems operator, follow a different script? Remember, John Ramsey wasn't just a businessman. He ran a military-connected tech firm embedded in the very arteries of U.S. intelligence infrastructure. He understood logistics. He understood optics. And in that moment, he controlled the narrative. Now shift your attention to the autopsy. JonBenet had signs of chronic trauma, past injuries, evidence of sustained abuse. That's in the coroner's report, hidden behind sanitized language. But it's there, the scars of something longer than one night. Who knew? Who allowed it? You think this family was isolated? Or were they surrounded by enablers, friends, doctors, handlers, who all saw, all chose silence? Because that's how these networks operate. Not in the shadows, but in plain sight, behind manicured lawns, designer clothing, Sunday school smiles. The more polished the surface, the darker the basement. And if you think this is limited to one family, one girl, one city, you're still dreaming. This is systemic. This is ritualized silence. And it's been happening for centuries. What you're unraveling now isn't just a murder. It's the blueprint of how power feeds itself. And once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere. Let's go deeper into the silence. Because that's where the real horror lives. Not in the screams, not in the headlines, but in the institutional quiet that follows. When JonBenet's case began to reach critical mass, when public outrage swelled and conspiracies circled, something remarkable happened. Everything stopped. No arrests, no trial, no movement. Just a quiet, calculated stall. And that stall wasn't just convenient. It was engineered. The DA's office claimed they lacked sufficient evidence. Yet a grand jury had already voted to indict both John and Patsy Ramsey. Not hearsay, evidence-based indictments. The jury believed there was cause to charge them with child abuse leading to death. So what happened? The district attorney overruled them, sealed the results, protected the illusion. Do you know how rare that is? Grand juries almost always align with prosecutors. The system is built for that. But when the process turned against the narrative, the system turned against itself. Ask yourself, What was so dangerous about allowing this case to reach open court? What might have been revealed under oath? Because trials aren't just about verdicts, they're about discovery. Once a case goes to trial, sealed files become accessible. Private communications, financial records, past incidents, connections, all of it is forced into the light. And that's what they feared. Not justice, exposure. The Ramsey family had powerful protectors, from PR consultants to ex-FBI agents, from top-tier attorneys to corporate media contacts. The entire case became a lesson in narrative containment. When public pressure built, they gave you distractions. The False Confession by John Marcar, new DNA theories, shifting suspects, but never momentum, just fog, because the real threat wasn't a rogue killer. It was a rogue truth. What if the abuse wasn't isolated? What if JonBenet was part of something bigger? A ring, a ritual, a structure that feeds off innocence and wraps itself in affluence. You think that's impossible? Then look up Jeffrey Epstein. Look up the Franklin scandal. Look up Dutrix in Belgium. Look up the Presidio daycare abuse. Same patterns. Same silence. Same elite immunity. Different names. Same design. And that design only exists for one reason: to hide the fact that evil doesn't always sneak in. Sometimes it owns the house. The deeper you go, the more one truth becomes undeniable. This was never just about JonBenet. This was about the machine. You were raised to believe that evil wears a mask, that it comes in the form of criminals, drifters, men in dark alleys. But real evil wears smiles, holds fundraisers, attends church, funds charities. It knows how to blend, how to perform, how to manipulate sympathy. JonBenet's story was designed to be just that, a story, a carefully choreographed tragedy, a machine-fed narrative that positioned the family as victims, the police as confused, and the public as helpless observers. But you're not helpless anymore, because now you see it. This was psychological warfare. Not on the Ramseys. On you. They wanted you overwhelmed, distracted by contradictions. One theory 1 week, a new suspect the next. DNA, no DNA. Intruder theory, family theory, then back again, round and round like a ritual wheel. Because when your mind spins, your vision blurs. That's not confusion. That's conditioning. And here's what most miss. The media was never outside the machine. It's a wing of the same cathedral. While investigators were blocked, reporters were fed. Selective leaks. Carefully sculpted images of JonBenet. Never the raw truth. Just enough tragedy to pull your heart, but not enough evidence to awaken your mind. Even the photos were part of the ritual. Pageant shots, makeup, dresses. They weren't honoring her. They were reinforcing the symbol, the doll, the child idol, the American Virgin, sacrificed under the Christmas tree of a fractured empire. Do you understand now? This case wasn't buried because it was complicated. It was buried because it was too clear. It revealed a structure they can't let you map, a path from beauty to blood, from innocence to initiation, from child to commodity. Because once you see it in JonBenet, you start seeing it in other places. In missing children whose names you never learned. In elite scandals that vanish from headlines in 24 hours. In every case where the powerful walk free, and the victims are told to rest in peace. But peace never comes. Not for them. Not for us. Because peace requires justice. And justice requires truth. And truth is what they fear most. Which is exactly why you must not stop here. You've now crossed the point of no return. This isn't just about understanding the JonBenet Ramsey case anymore. This is about understanding the architecture of hidden control. The system behind the systems. The one that doesn't appear in textbooks, because it writes them. Let me ask you something brutal. What is a child worth to the people who own everything? To the elite, children aren't just sons and daughters. They're vessels, energy, and in the darkest corners of power, they're a form of currency, not just in trafficking, but in ritual. Because ritual is how ancient systems communicate. Blood is language. Pain is a key. And the death of a child, especially one publicly adored, becomes a kind of open broadcast to those who understand the code. JonBenet wasn't just murdered. She was used. Her death was a message. And now you've been hearing that message over news broadcasts, documentaries, courtroom sketches, endless replays of a mother sobbing into the camera for almost 3 decades. It's kept you entranced. But here's the darker reality. JonBenet wasn't the only message. You're living in a society that has normalized horror and marketed silence. Hollywood buries scandals. Politicians deflect. Intelligence agencies deny. And all the while, the missing posters keep going up. The same eyes, the same ages, the same patterns. And yet, no one connects the dots. Because the people tasked with connecting them, the FBI, the media, the social engineers, are part of the design. They aren't there to solve the puzzle. They're there to protect the illusion that there's no puzzle at all. So here's the truth no one once whispered. What happened in that Boulder basement was part of a ritualized ecosystem, one where money, secrecy, and pain converge, and the people who benefit from it walk among you, at galas, in boardrooms, in televised debates. And every time you call this a cold case, you help them keep it cold. But your silence ends here, because now you know, and now you must speak, not for justice the system can offer, but for reality itself. Say it aloud if you have to. We were never meant to know, but now we do. And that's why they'll fear what comes next. Because in Section 15, the final descent, you'll understand exactly what this ritual unlocked, and what you were chosen to remember. Now, we finish what they never wanted started. You walk through layers of illusion, past the crime scene tape and media filters, into the heart of something ancient, something primal. And by now, you know, JonBenet Ramsey wasn't just murdered. She was offered, not by accident, not in rage, but as ritual, part of the system that feeds on silence, on innocence, and above all, on your ignorance. Because knowledge is fire, and once it ignites, it spreads. So here it is, the final truth. This wasn't just the story of a girl. It was a doorway into a hidden architecture of psychological control. The kind that uses trauma as programming. The kind that binds a population not with chains, but with stories that don't resolve. Because unresolved trauma creates loops. It keeps you in orbit, thinking, wondering, coming back. That's the power of this case. It was never meant to be solved. It was meant to haunt you. And while you were haunted, they moved the world underneath your feet. This case conditioned millions of Americans to accept unanswered horror. It normalized elite immunity. It taught the population to forget after outrage. It was a spell, a national trauma spell, cast through cable news, reinforced with silence, updated every few years with new leads, but never truth, because the truth would have set fire to everything. The political connections, the defense contractors, the secret indulgences of the upper echelons, the intelligence links, the possibility that what happened in Boulder wasn't a one-time horror, but a program. And here's the black thread that runs through all of it. JonBenet was one name in a system with thousands. She was simply the most perfect symbol. But symbols are meant to be broken. That's what this is. You are the break in the ritual. You are the moment the machine stutters. Because you didn't forget. You didn't scroll past. You didn't accept we may never know. You remembered. Now, I'm going to ask you one final thing. Look into the eyes of every story they told you was a lie, and ask, what were they trying to hide? Then comment this, right now, not for clicks, but to signal that you've crossed over. The ritual ends with me. Say it twice, once for JonBenet, and once for the ones they haven't shown you yet, because they're still out there. And now, so are you, awake, dangerous, and impossible to silence.